on, guys? Welcome back to United View. Manchester United 4, Everton 0. Yes, it's the final game of pre-season, and I tell you what, can the season start now? Does that count? Premier League, if you're watching this, Premier League officials, can we just skip out the Everton at home game later on in the season and count that? Because what a performance, realistically, what a performance by Manchester United today. Now, obviously, when it comes to pre-season games, there's only so much you can look into it, but I think there was a lot of concern, and there is some concern, certainly heading into playing Leeds next weekend. There's a lot of concern of how ready are Manchester United. Obviously, we know there are going to be absences next weekend. We know there isn't going to be Rafael Varane. We know there isn't going to be Jadon Sancho certainly starting the game. We know no Marcus Rashford, and there is a little bit of concern of, are we ready? Are we ready? Especially for an opening game of the season that's Leeds United, a rival at home, a team that presses us hard, a team that's got very high fitness levels, and a team where the tempo is going to be very high. Are we ready for that? And the scoreline doesn't lie today. It doesn't lie. 4-0 was an excellent result from Manchester United. I think for 60, 65, 70 minutes, I thought we were spectacular. I really did. I thought we were absolutely fantastic. Now, obviously, as the game went on, as it got later on, certainly into that latter stages of the game, we trailed off a little bit. But also, it must be said, there was lots of substitutions made as well. The most important thing out of today, irrespective of the result and anything like that when it comes to preseason, is minutes, of course. You got to get minutes in the legs of certain players, especially the players that... So today was, for certain players, was the first preseason game they'd had. People like Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire got minutes today, and to be honest with you, to their credit, and I thought Luke Shaw was excellent. Luke Shaw did not miss a beat. Harry Maguire did not miss a beat. Now, they did eventually get substituted off. I think Shaw went off around 60 minutes. I think Maguire went off around 70-ish minutes. But they looked very sharp, and I think that's the real big thing I'm taking away from today's game, is how sharp Manchester United looked. Again, there's lots of concern and maybe, I don't want to say criticism, but certainly concern, I think, is the right word, of how ready are Manchester United? What are the fitness levels looking like? How sharp are we going to be? Considering last season, once the season started against Crystal Palace last year, we were miles off it. Miles off. We obviously weren't ready, and it took us a couple of games just to get the fitness levels where they needed to be. And if today is indicative of what to expect next week, I think United look fairly, I mean, obviously the whole team of Ollie's ideal starting 11 isn't ready, but certainly the players that are set to start next week, and I think started today, is going to probably be the team that starts next week. They look ready. They look ready. I think that starting 11 that we saw today, that back five is the back five that's going to start next week. That's De Gea, Shaw, Maguire, Lindelof, Wan-Bissaka, the same essentially back five we had last season. There could be possibly, I think maybe some discussion as to, is Donny van de Beek going to play next week, or is it going to be Paul Pogba? Obviously, Van de Beek went off, half-time, and Pogba came on, so I think that discussion might be there. It might be a discussion point of, does Solskjaer start Pogba instead of maybe Dan James, who started out on the left today? Of course, the front three was James, Martial, and Greenwood. I thought Martial looked sharp as well. Greenwood, of course, got his goal too. So, certainly, I think that starting 11 is indicative of maybe what to expect next week. Certainly from a defensive point of view, and we'll touch on the defence later on. But I think overall it was a very, very good performance, and certainly a sharp performance. I think that's really the thing I wanted. Sometimes when it comes to preseason, you kind of have to look further than the full-time score. You have to look further than that and say, okay, did we see energy? Did we see something that can make me hold on to something for what's about to come in the season? And I thought United had a lot of energy. They looked really sharp. From the opponent's point of view, I thought Everton, I mean, obviously this isn't an Everton fan channel, but Everton, I thought, certainly in the first half, looked miles off it. Miles off it. Now, obviously, you could state maybe that's because Manchester United was so sharp today. They had so much energy, certainly in the first half, but Everton looked leggy after 20 minutes. I thought Everton looked leggy. They looked all over the place. I think they're marking from set pieces several times. Obviously, Maguire got his goal from a set piece, but again, I thought Everton were miles off it. But that first half, if you want to look at is Manchester United ready for the season? The pace of that game for the first half I thought was great. For a pre-season friendly, it was end to end, it was up and down, and to be honest with you, it's sharper than I thought we would look. I was not expecting us to look that sharp. I was hoping to see some form of progression. Of course, the players that did play against QPR were off it. There was no doubt about that. Certainly for your first pre-season game, the one after Derby, that is, they were off. The team that played against Brentford was a little bit sharper. Of course, we lost the game against Preston, which was unfortunate. And again, I think that's where those concerns certainly started to come from of, have we had enough time? Have we had enough games? What does that look like? But we were sharp. Again, I mentioned Luke Shaw earlier on. He looked, I think his first run down the left, he literally went past someone and whipped the ball in. And I went, this guy hasn't missed a beat. And not only is this a guy, of course, that was playing out through the summer, but he was playing with broken ribs in the summer. And he still looked completely up to pace. And the progression of Luke Shaw over the course of the last 18 months or so, 2 years, really is spectacular. He really is in that conversation of the best left back in the world right now. And I know some people that aren't Manchester United fans will be like, oh, I don't know about that. But realistically, tell me a better left back. You know, Roberto Carlos, they're calling him. I mean, really, realistically, he's in that conversation. Now, if we're going to go through the goals quickly, the first goal, Jordan Pickford today, by the way. Jordan Pickford, look, as someone that used to play in goal, I going into the Euros, I wasn't the biggest advocate of having Jordan Pickford go in. Because I did think that someone like a Nick Pope was maybe a better option, but of course he pulled out of injury and our hands were a bit tied there. Jordan Pickford was maybe the best option that was left over. But you couldn't criticize him during the Euros because he was fantastic. He made some great saves, didn't concede a goal until the semi-final. How'd you criticize that? He silenced a lot of doubters. Apparently, the Jordan Pickford that played in the Euros and the Jordan Pickford that plays for Everton are two different people. Because Jordan Pickford that played for Everton was right back to where he left off today because he was all over the place. All over the place. The first goal was a goal where Luca Digne's going to head it back to Pickford. I saw some people online trying to say that Digne screwed up the header. For me, Pickford, the defender's always going to make the header there. You've got to be a calm goalkeeper, a calm presence in that situation, and he doesn't do that. He rushes out, Digne heads it, it just bounces off Pickford, Greenwood taps it in. I say taps it in, it was still a difficult finish. And speaking of Greenwood, it's a big season. It's a big season for Greenwood because I think people are expecting more from him this year. I think people are expecting more goals. I think with the arrival of Sancho, the hope is certainly, from my point of view, Greenwood's going to be focused more down the middle. Cavani's not going to play every game. And I know Martial likes to think of himself as a striker. I think he's better off the left than a striker. There's going to be competition on that side as well. But I think Greenwood this season has to be predominantly down the middle. He might not be next weekend. I think that's out of necessity of the players that we have available. But Greenwood, once again, looked very sharp. And this was a guy that didn't go to the Euros. And I think he benefited for it because he looks very sharp because of that. Second goal, Harry Maguire headed from a corner. Speaking of things we want to see more of, we want to see more of that. How many times since Harry Maguire's come to Manchester United have we said, he's got to score more on set pieces? That's what we thought, right? Slabhead, we're getting slabhead to Manchester United. We're going to be having all of these crosses come in and Maguire's going to be scoring all of these goals. And I think maybe he scored like 1 or 2 headers from set pieces. So it was refreshing to see him score that against Everton today. But I'd rather it happen in the season. I won't lie. But to be honest with you, I think Digne, again, I think he was the one marking Maguire for all of those set pieces because Maguire nearly scored another one a couple of minutes later. I mean, when I say, if you didn't watch the game, when I say Everton were all over the place, they were all over the place in that first half. It was ridiculous. But that's not to say they didn't have their own chances, it must be said. Iwobi had a chance pretty much straight after where it was a situation once again, and this is probably one of my biggest criticisms of Aaron Wan-Bissaka. I'm certainly not a Charlie Austin of, he can't defend or anything like that because that's ridiculous. Of course he can defend. He's got a great look at the statistics and I know they can be manipulated, but he's a great defender. And obviously the biggest criticism of Wan-Bissaka is going forward, but one of the criticisms I do have of Wan-Bissaka is a lot of the time he has no idea what's over his shoulder. No idea what's over his shoulder, and he got caught a couple of times last season, and it was a similar situation today. Iwobi, ball comes in, Iwobi, if he uses his right foot, he goes for some reason with his left foot or his wrong foot, and he just puts it into the side net, and he should score. Then it should have been 2-1. There's no doubt about that. So it was a case of Wan-Bissaka not knowing what's there, and Van der Beek, he was ball watching as well. I think that was his man, and there was no communication. There's still frailties. There's still frailties there, and obviously the goal of the game is Bruno Fernandes' free kick, and I think I put it on Twitter that you could possibly criticize Pickford. I know a lot of people like to criticize goalkeepers when people score free kicks from that far out, and they'll say, well, it wasn't directly in the corner, and maybe the keeper should shuffle over quicker. The ball was hit at pace. It was far out. I think you just have to give credit to Bruno for an excellent free kick. And speaking of people that were sharp today, considering that certain games last season with Bruno Fernandes, you could argue that he wasn't maybe influencing the game as much as we had expected him to in the past, and his standards are just so high that I think we expect so much from him all the time. It's impossible to live up sometimes to those standards. I thought today, again, looked very sharp, very threatening, influenced the game significantly. Got in between the lines, got into those pockets, put great free balls in, and just looked a threat, constantly looked a threat. And I think that's the Bruno that we want to see this season going forward. There have been games last year where it looked like, just because he was just consistently playing games for 18 months for Manchester United with no break, he looked burnt out. And I know he did go to the Euros, but he did appear to be just at least a little bit fresher. Just a little bit fresher today. So that was certainly really encouraging. And the goal is spectacular. If you haven't seen it, there's a ton of different angles, because of course there was crowds, there was fans in the stadium today as well. I think 55,000. So there's a ton of different angles of Fernandes' free kick today, and it's a really good free kick. I wouldn't want to criticize Pickford too much from that one, even though he was shocking today. The free kick was excellent. I do want to point out Nemanja Matic as well. I thought Matic was quality. He really was quality. The issue is with Matic is that if we could get that version of Matic all season, because that's the version of Nemanja Matic from, say, 3 years ago, that's a younger Matic today. He rolled back the years. That is a Matic that is calm, composed, the glue on the ball. Not maybe people don't really notice him that much, break things up, slows things down when they need to be slowed down. But when things need to be sped up, he'll put a ball forward. He'll play a forward pass. That's the Nemanja Matic of really helping the game tick over, helping really dictate the tempo of the game while sitting in that hole between the defence and the midfield position. If we had that version of Matic, and a younger version of Matic, because that's what it was, a younger version of Matic, I don't think people would be crying out for a defensive midfielder that much. He rolled back the years today. The issue is for a fact that version of the Nemanja Matic isn't going to be there all season. That's ultimately the big problem when it comes to him. It's just the age. There have been games, especially over the course of the last 12 months or so, where you watch him play and you think the legs are gone. Now, it's obviously easy to be going into a pre-season, having a pre-season and looking very fresh. It's different once you get to December, January. Is he still going to have those legs about him? Probably not, which is why we need that defensive midfielder position so badly. We did see the likes of Fred and Pogba and Mata come on at halftime. There were plenty of other names that came on during the match as well. As I mentioned, Shaw came off after 60. Maguire came off after 70. The game was kind of, it was over, obviously. Not that it was super really competitive anyway. But United certainly took their foot off the gas second half, I felt. And I think that's probably because of the changes and maybe a little bit of the burnout. Maybe a bit of the burnout as well, because we really were frenetic in that first half. We were high energy, high tempo, high pace. We did drop off. I think that was inevitable, especially considering, again, players coming off, a lack of a pre-season. But I thought again, the game was it wasn't the first half. It certainly wasn't as frenetic as the first half was. But Everton had their opportunities, second half. Andros Townsend hit the bar, should score. Absolutely should score. And I think that issue was a ball came into the box. Maguire stretching, Shaw stretching, can't get there. Townsend hits the bar. Dan James is just getting back at that period. So you could argue that maybe he didn't track back at that time. I think that does open the eyes to say that there is still frailties at the back. There is still an element of fragility to that back four that's there. That's why we need Varane. Now, does Townsend get the opportunity if Varane's playing? I don't know. We can't say that. Varane was watching, by the way. He posted an Instagram story whilst he's quarantining that I think he was feeding his child and watching the game. So talk about a great dad, multitasking at the same time. Credit to Rafael Varane. But there certainly there was an element of fragility, certainly still with the defence today. And I don't know if that's because of tiredness. I think we saw it a lot last season anyway. So that's probably an issue as well. And a couple of minutes later, Iwobi squares it in the box and Demarai Gray should score. So there were points of the game, even though the 4-0 scoreline flatters us. I think the first half, again, we were tremendous and Everton were miles off it. There were points in the game, you can argue, Iwobi should score, Townsend should score, Gray should score. And that certainly makes the scoreline a lot more interesting, doesn't it? So certainly I think there's an element of watching that game being like, I'm so glad we've got Rafael Varane because there is still frailties there. And for the 3 goals we did score, Everton did have chances. There was an element as well where De Gea comes out, flaps it across. Dalot prevents a goal too. Dalot, it must be said, came on second half and was fantastic. I mean, you can't argue. Eventually he scores a goal as well. Ball comes in. Begovic, who came on for Pickford in the second half, obviously they signed him on a free from Bournemouth, Everton. He was in no man's land, absolutely in no man's land. It's a flick-on kind of header from Dalot, but realistically, no goalkeeper should be beaten by that. If a goalkeeper stands on his line, he catches it like that. It's not a difficult save to make at all. He's just in no man's land. But he got his goal, and I thought Dalot played really well. And speaking of people, because I was watching the coverage on MUTV, speaking of people that people were concerned about, we talk about Sancho coming back and taking extra time off, Cavani and players like Maguire and Shaw, and this delayed comeback for a lot of people. Dalot played in the European Under-21s Championships. He then played in the European Championships for Portugal as well, and he still was back relatively early, and he's still playing in these pre-season friendlies. It does make you wonder. It does make you wonder. But overall, I was very happy with today. Again, I only wish that this scoreline would be the same when we play Everton at Old Trafford, because especially that first half performance, that first 30, 45 minutes was surprisingly good. And I know some people will say, well, shouldn't we be expecting this? Good players and all that kind of stuff. Of course we should. We've got quality players, and that was a strong lineup by Ollie today. I just think the concern was, and it probably still will be, I think there's no doubt about that, because pre-season's pre-season and an actual Premier League match is a Premier League match. But certainly there was a concern. Are we really up to pace? Do we have the fitness? Do we have the energy? But if we play like we did in the first half today against Leeds, I don't see any reason why we can't be scoring goals against Leeds as well, especially with the crowd behind us. So overall 4-0, but I was very, very happy today, and excited for the season already. So you can let me know what you think. Manchester United 4, Everton 0. Let me know your thoughts on the game and your predictions for next week as well. You can let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the video as well. And be sure to subscribe, bottom right hand corner, to United View. Lots more coming up as the season begins. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.